Neighbor from hell gets exactly what he deserves. It was supposed to be a fresh start. A little fixer-upper in a quiet neighborhood, a chance to finally breathe after the soul-crushing divorce. The house was small, the yard manageable, and the price, well, let's just say it was all I could afford. I pictured myself sipping lemonade on the porch, finally at peace. Then I met Bob. He was out tending his meticulously manicured lawn when I pulled up in the moving truck. He sauntered over, a forced smile plastered on his face. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he boomed, his voice a little too loud. "I'm Bob. Just wanted to let you know we take pride in our lawns here, keeps the property values up." I tried to be friendly. "I'm Sarah. Good to meet you. And yes, I noticed everything looks perfect." He chuckled, a sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Well, it takes work, especially for a woman living alone. You gonna handle all this yourself?" I bristled. "I think I can manage." That was the beginning. The first week was fine. A few awkward but mostly harmless encounters. But then came the suggestions. The grass was too long, it wasn't. The flowers were the wrong color, since when did petunias need HOA approval? My garbage cans were too close to the property line, they weren't even on his side. I tried to be reasonable. I cut the grass twice a week, even though it barely needed it. I replaced the petunias with impatience. I moved the garbage cans an inch, even though it made lugging them to the curb a pain. But nothing was ever enough. He started parking his massive Ford F-150 so close to my driveway that it was a struggle to get my little Honda Civic in and out. He'd crank up his lawnmower at 7:00 a.m. on weekends, conveniently right outside my bedroom window. He even started leaving passive-aggressive notes on my door, printed in a large, menacing font. "Weeds are unsightly," one screamed. I complained to the HOA. Mr. Henderson, the president, was a meek, balding man who looked terrified of Bob. He mumbled something about trying to mediate, but nothing ever changed. Bob just got bolder. "He's a bully," Emily said after I'd spent an hour ranting to her on the phone. "He's picking on you because he thinks he can get away with it. You need to fight back." Emily, ever the pragmatist, suggested a few creative solutions. Sugar in his gas tank, deflating his tires, replacing his prized garden gnomes with plastic flamingos. I appreciated her support, but I wasn't ready to stoop to his level. Yet, then came the sprinkler incident. I woke up one morning to a flooded yard and a water bill that could have paid for a weekend getaway. The sprinkler heads were completely mangled, like someone had taken a hammer to them. I knew exactly who was responsible. That's when I installed the security cameras. The next few weeks were a blur of mounting frustration and simmering rage. The cameras captured Bob in all his glory, accidentally bumping my garbage cans with his truck, subtly spreading weed killer on my lawn, even adjusting my security camera to point away from his property. I called the police. Officer Miller came out, listened to my story, looked at the footage, and sighed. "Ma'am, this is a neighborhood dispute. I can't arrest a man for being annoying." I felt defeated. David, the retired lawyer who lived across the street, saw me struggling. He'd witnessed some of Bob's antics firsthand. "That man is a menace," he said, shaking his head. "He's been doing this for years. Nobody's ever stood up to him." David offered to help pro bono. He explained my legal options: a restraining order, harassment charges, property damage claims. He even helped me draft a detailed log of Bob's behavior, documenting every incident with dates, times, and supporting evidence. It turned out I wasn't the only one suffering. Mrs. Rodriguez, the sweet elderly woman on the other side of Bob, was terrified of him. She confided that he'd yelled at her for letting her cat wander onto his lawn. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, a young couple a few houses down, had also been targets of his petty harassment. Bob had complained about their children playing too loudly, their car being parked improperly, even the color of their house. Nobody wanted to get involved. They were afraid of retaliation. Then, out of the blue, Craig, my ex-husband, called. He heard through the grapevine about my neighbor troubles and wanted to offer his support. His support consisted mostly of undermining my decisions and reminding me how much easier my life was when he was around. "Maybe this whole single woman owning a house thing isn't for you, Sarah," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I hung up on him. It all came to a head when I discovered my rose bushes, a housewarming gift from Emily, withered and dying. Someone had poured poison on them. I reviewed the security footage. There he was, Bob, in his bathrobe, casually strolling onto my property with a watering can filled with something. That was it, the final straw. The moment I stopped trying to be reasonable and started plotting my revenge. First, I filed for a restraining order. The hearing was a circus. Bob, predictably, denied everything. He claimed I was a crazy, vindictive woman trying to ruin his life. He even tried to suggest that I was the one harassing him. Then I presented my evidence. The photos, the videos, the police reports, the HOA complaints. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson bravely testified about Bob's pattern of harassment. I stood there, calm and collected, and laid out the facts. I detailed the sleepless nights, the constant anxiety, the feeling of being unsafe in my own home. I looked directly at Bob. You think you can get away with bullying people because you're older and you think nobody will stand up to you. I said, my voice steady. But you're wrong. I'm not afraid of you anymore. The judge granted the restraining order. Bob was ordered to stay at least 50 feet away from me and my property. He was furious, but there was nothing he could do. The case was also referred to the district attorney for possible charges of harassment and property damage. Officer Miller, now a believer, started digging into Bob's past. He discovered a string of similar incidents with other neighbors, going back years. Nobody had ever reported them, too afraid to cross him. The HOA, sensing the shift in power, finally took action. Mr. Henderson was ousted as president, replaced by a younger, more assertive woman who wasn't afraid to stand up to Bob. They imposed fines for his numerous violations of neighborhood rules. But that wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel the same humiliation and fear he'd inflicted on me. I decided to amplify the consequences. I knew Bob valued his reputation above all else. So, I made copies of the restraining order, the police reports, and the HOA complaints. I discreetly distributed them to every house in the neighborhood. I posted them on the community bulletin board at the local grocery store. I even sent a copy to the local newspaper. The story went viral as a local news story can go. Neighborhood bully terrorizes single woman, the headline screamed. Bob's face was plastered all over the news. He became a pariah. It turned out Bob was also facing additional charges for vandalism and disturbing the peace, stemming from incidents with other neighbors who finally felt safe enough to come forward. He was forced to pay restitution for the damage he caused to my property and the properties of other neighbors. He lost his position on the HOA board. He became the laughingstock of the community. The final touch, I hired Kevin, a hardworking college student, to landscape my yard. He ripped out the dead rose bushes and planted a beautiful garden filled with vibrant, fragrant flowers. It was a masterpiece, a symbol of my resilience and defiance. One evening I sat on my porch, sipping lemonade, watching the sunset. My garden was in full bloom, the air filled with the sweet scent of roses. Bob's house was dark and silent, the curtains drawn. I smiled. It wasn't about ruining his life. It was about reclaiming mine. It was about standing up to a bully and showing him that he couldn't get away with it anymore. It was about creating a safe and peaceful home for myself, free from his harassment and intimidation. And it worked.